is an important lesson in learning to emphasize your strengths. And I'm going to tie this in. This is stream of consciousness here. I don't have an outline for this talk, but it just all came to a revelation to me. Now, people that know my story know that I'm a guitar player that grew up in Virginia. I ended up meeting the Wooten brothers, Victor Wooten, and these amazing R&B guys who kind of took us guys under their wing, and we would jam to the all hours playing Rick James and James Brown and all this kind of stuff at my house out in Virginia. And man, that whole experience shaped me, right? Learning how to play funk rhythm guitar, and also being a huge fan of Prince and Rick James and James Brown and all that stuff, man. So when I got out to LA and I got in a Sunset Strip band, and I just happened to get into the band that had a horn section and was trying to capture some of that funk, some of that dance vibe into their hard rock. And I thought, this is exactly what I needed to be doing, because that's where my basis had been. That's where I had that legitimate funk feel in my playing. And so this is an important lesson for everybody that tunes into this channel, and especially young guys that are trying to make their way, or trying to start an original band, or trying to write your own songs, or come up with your own thing. First, you've got to know yourself inside and out. What are your strengths? What sets you apart from everybody else? And I knew the one thing that I could do better than any of the other Sunset Strip guitar players. And there were guys that could, shred more, or better whammy tricks, or looked better, or, had more gear, better sounding gear, and all of those things, right? But I knew the one thing that I could do that didn't require a better guitar or a better amp or any of that, or better technique or any of that. I knew what I could do is shape this band and emphasize the feel, emphasize the groove, emphasize the rhythm. If other bands are going to have better singers or more stable lineups or any of that, and we're not going to play their game. We are going to establish ourselves, and I always established myself as a white guy that could play funk, that had good feel, that could play the blues, could play with feeling, play in the pocket, play cool rhythm guitar parts, and make them feel better than anybody else that was on that scene. There was no other person. I'm not just tooting my horn, but what I was doing was realizing my strengths, right? And planning on emphasizing them. And what that enabled me to do was then go get with the bass player and go, look, man, what you're doing is cool. You're doing cool stuff, but I'm going to teach you a couple things. We would sit around the shock house, and maybe he'd have his bass and I'd have his classical guitar, and maybe we had a little bit of time before we were going to go out and promote. And I would teach him things about being on the one. James Brown, if you listen to everybody's music, it's that down, boo, boo, boo. It's hitting that downbeat of the bass on the one. And he used to wear out Bootsy Collins, who's one of the funkiest bass players of all time. And he'd mess with Bootsy and say, man, you just didn't have it tonight, Bootsy. You didn't have it. Wasn't on the one. Nope, wasn't on the one. But man, teaching guys that don't have that, didn't come from the background that I came from, jamming all night, funk tunes and Rick James and all of that stuff, and understanding that feel, coming from the South. Man, maybe it's Maybe it's being raised on ribs and cornbread and collard greens and all of that stuff. Maybe that seeps into your bloodstream and gives you that funk feel. Maybe it's hearing that AM radio blasting James Brown while I'm washing dishes at my mom's restaurant. Maybe it's all of that combined, right? But I knew getting out there on the Strip, first of all, I knew out there in LA, the rap scene was taking off. You know, Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre and NWA and all of that West Coast rap, which was largely based on funkadelic, Parliament funkadelic samples. Extremely great funk grooves. That was another band that I listened to a lot, Parliament funkadelic. I loved Flashlight as a kid. That music was, I was the one white kid in my school that bought Parliament Funkadelic 45 of Flashlight. And I would play that over and over again while all the other kids were listening to Rush and whatever else that they were, Kiss or whatever they were listening to. I love the sound of Flashlight. I love that groove. I love when the groove drops down and the funky rhythm guitars and all of that stuff. It was in my bloodstream, man. And so getting out to LA and realizing, hey, man, we've got to operate within this 4 or 5 long-haired dudes with loud guitars and loud bass and loud drums. But that doesn't mean that we can't make it feel better than all of those other guys. All those other guys are just bash, 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 right? But working with the band, working with the rhythm section, at one point we changed drummers. So then we were always working on grooves, working on our feel, writing songs that we thought were getting more and more funky for a while there. And incorporating rap and all of these things in the thing. Because my thing is this: you're never going to beat somebody in life trying to play their game. We're not going to go out there and try to out LA, right? And I wasn't going to go out there and try to be the next Eddie Van Halen. There were already guys out there doing that. So what could I do? Ask yourself this. If you're creating something, what can I do to set myself aside from everybody else? You know what? This theory, this thing that I did back then, it would work in country music now. Jerry Reed was a great country player, and a song like Amos Moses is about as funky a track as can be. So, man, any music that you play can be played with better feel, more intensity, or more feeling. And that should shape how you create stuff, right? I knew that when we got out there, right, and we played our stuff, I knew that girls love to dance. That's all there is to it, man. We would have every girl out there, and all of a sudden they're all dancing in front of the band, or they're getting literally turned on by how good the band is grooving, how funky the guitar parts are, how I got my bass player dropping it on the one and then playing embellishment and dropping it on the one. And incorporating that into the show. And people want to party. It was the fourth quarter of the Sunset Strip, and we knew that the hairband thing had been done to death, and there were other bands that were just straight up, rock and roll and not a lot of swing and not a lot of funk to it. And, finding that, emphasizing your strength is what set us apart. And I knew I said, that other band was really good, but when we get out there, we're going to groove and we're going to show them. They're going to see by our body language that we're bringing something that the other bands don't have. And it didn't matter whether we had what singer we had on stage. We were going to have an incredible groove. We were going to sound good as a band together. And that's what set my band apart from all the other bands on the Strip. There were great bands on the Strip, and a lot of them did that LA hard rock, sleaze rock, thing great. But I knew that you have to stand out from the pack. You have to do something else, right? You've got to find your niche. And it's the same thing with doing these videos on YouTube, finding my voice, finding my niche, finding my angle. But I thought this was an important thing to talk about because it gives you an idea of my mindset. When we played so many shows where we were headlining, but we also played a lot of jams, like the Policeman's Ball, the Fireman's Ball, at Palomino and FM station. We would play the Happening Harry's Hellhole at the Central and Ice Tie and different places. And we would get up and have to follow all kinds of different bands. And some of them were good. Some of them, were okay. And some of them weren't good. But if we had to follow somebody that was really good, I wasn't worried about it because what we did was so unique and felt so good that we had our own thing. And people would quickly know that about this band, that this band was going to go out there and we were going to embody the groove. We were going to feel that groove and the audience was going to feel it with us. And the important thing about this lesson and why I just said, man, I got to do this video right now, is that this advice of finding and knowing your strength, find what sets you apart from everybody else. And it's the same thing whether you're putting together a YouTube channel or you're doing shorts or whatever. What can you do better than everybody else? And then emphasize it, right? Find your skill set, hone it, right? Make it as good as it can be, and then focus on that, right? And that will give you the confidence to not worry about the guy that's shredding 1,000,000 miles an hour, or the band that's got a guy with a 4-octave range, or, this other band who the guys all look like male models, or whatever thing that you're competing with or competing against all of the other videos online. You're competing against the world now. When we were on the Sunset Strip, we were competing against the other bands on the Strip, but we didn't feel like we were competing against every artist in the world. And that's where we are now. That's where we are with the internet. So you even more now have to figure out what your angle is, your strength, right? And emphasize that. And if it's groove and feel, then make it groove and make it feel as good as you can. If it's rocking hard or shredding or any of those things, man, find even the niche within the niche that sets you apart from everybody else. And if you can figure that out, you can figure out the thing that makes you unique, what makes your music unique, what makes your personality unique. If you're just a talking head, then that is the thing that you need to focus on. That's what's going to set you apart from everybody else out there and give you the power to succeed, right? So I hope this helps everybody out there. And man, thank you so much for tuning into this video. Just stream of consciousness thought, ways that I can help people out there achieve their goals. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.